Hello, my name is Rachel Eichman, and today we are going to take a look at British literature and the essentials of three major literary movements. Beginning roughly in the middle of the 18th century, dating up until present day, British literature can be divided amongst three movements: Romanticism, Victorianism, and Modernism. Each of these time periods are dictated by the characteristics in which the literature and art embodied during that time. Looking through the ages, British literature tells a story concerning the events and how writers felt about them while they were happening. While there are different characteristics that are specific to each movement, it is important to remember that not every piece of writing embodies all of these characteristics. In fact, none of them do. As you can see, written works weren't the only thing to come from these periods. There was an abundance of art in many different forms. Dating roughly from 1789 until the middle of the 19th century, the Romantic period marks the beginning of a writing style that questioned and oftentimes challenged the status quo. In a seemingly industrialized 18th century Europe, the authors began to celebrate and recognize individual worth, the presence of nature, and the unfairness of the oppressed commoner in society. In a world where factories and machines seemed to begin to take the place of human workers, this literary movement was critical to the common man or woman as developments in technology began to threaten their individualism. As writers began to diverge from the traditional, there are many specific characteristics that poets and authors included in their work that help to distinguish the Romantic period from all other literary movements. Some of the most common characteristics, which can be seen in Anna Barbauld's poem, The Mouse's Petition, include an interest in the betterment of the common man, a discussion surrounding the poet's mind and emotions, and a revolutionary spirit. Taking a closer look at Barbauld's poem and how she demonstrates the romantic values, her depiction of the mouse can be said to represent the common man. Through the loaded words that she uses, like impending fate, oppressive force, and tyrant's chain, Barbauld makes a strong political statement concerning the oppressed in her society. She pulls from her own emotions in order to effectively communicate these truthful experiences. This image that she creates of the common individual demonstrates the political shifts during this time were not in favor of the average person. Additionally, she shows a celebration of the individual in the line, "The well-taught philosophic mind to all compassion gives." Radical thinking for her time, here Barbauld suggests that all people, including women, should be given equality and equal education. In doing so, all people would have the right tools to succeed, thus alluding to the revolutionary spirit of her work. A feminist and human rights activist, Anna Barbauld is one of the most respected poets of the Romantic period. Marked by Queen Victoria's reign, the Victorian movement in art and literature sought to represent an age of energy and innovations, a question of faith, reformations in the industrialized society, and the woman in question. Much like the age before it, the Victorian movement embodied a sort of revolutionary spirit, but in a much more proactive way. As society became industrialized very quickly, the population also grew, making the rich richer and the poor poorer. Unique to this time period, many authors began to question their faith in God and in the government. If we examine Thomas Carlyle's Captains of Industry more closely, it is obvious that this piece was written in the Victorian age. In his essay, Carlyle makes a claim that, while government has the power to do a lot, it can in no wise do all. Carlyle makes a call to action for the people of Victorian England, stating that the government cannot do what society is radically called to do. As is per Victorian spirit, Carlyle also recognizes that government and God are two very separate components, and that, as the leaders in society, the government should also recognize this. Overall, Thomas Carlyle develops his own view of faith based upon his view of the divine and the presence of each individual. He also states that, unlike the views pre-Victorian, an elite few needed to take over and radically change the industrial views in society. Just as other Victorian writers were concerned with human inequality, especially because of how quickly industrialization took place, Carlyle comments that the true love of men cannot be bought by cash payment. Through his concern for the individual, the recognition of government versus God, and his view on the subject of the responsibility of society, Thomas Carlyle demonstrates an embodiment of Victorian values in his essay, Captains of Industry. Unlike the literary movements before it, modernist writers often focused on themes surrounding chaos, instability, pessimism, a confused sense of identity and place in the world, as well as an increased concern for where the world was going and who we are as beings. Beginning after the death of Queen Victoria, the modern movement demonstrated a large shift in sensibilities, specifically in regards to the rights of women, the breakthrough in technological innovations, and the widening gap between social classes. One of the major events that occurred during this time period was World War I. The war shifted the way that people thought, and after seeing the damages that an overhaul of destruction can have on the world, writers felt more inclined to accelerate social and technological change. Additionally, the events of the war exposed many realities surrounding the mental and physical worth of the individual. While some authors took a much lighter approach to World War I and their writings, Wilfred Owen sought to expose the true realities surrounding death and destruction. In his poem Dulce et Decorum Est, Wilfred Owen wanted to make others aware of the invalid perceptions surrounding war that were circulating various nations at this time. As is per the modernist spirit, Owen also conveys a tone that is awfully dark and serious, as he writes about how he witnessed many of his brothers dying in battle, choking, drowning. The line, "Watch the white eye writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil sick of sin," also helps to convey this tone while demonstrating a much more pessimistic view of the world. Much of the propaganda that circulated during this time painted a much different picture of the war, one that Owen was trying to declare as inaccurate. Through these images, Owen is able to accurately paint an unveiled picture of what it was like being a soldier fighting in the war. While it was much more graphic writing than what we saw in the Romantic and Victorian eras, the modern writer wanted to write about the truth, especially in regards to the war and the major events surrounding it. While what you have seen in this presentation has painted an accurate picture of each of the three literary movements, we have only just scratched the surface. So many amazing and insightful authors, scientists, inventors, painters, etc. were born and flourished in each of these three time periods. So much of what we study and know today can be attributed to the discoveries of the Romantics, Victorians, and Modernists. It is important to remember that, while each era embodies a different set of characteristics, all of the authors and artists alike from each movement were only seeking to further their understanding of humankind and the world that we live in. I hope that you have all enjoyed this presentation and that you have learned something new about British literature after 1790. Thank you, and until next time.